Good afternoon, MOCA friends. I'm Neil Gibbs, Chief of Staff at the Museum of Chinese America. So we hope you are feeling safe and taking good care of yourself and your loved ones. So Lunar New Year is coming. So this year is the Year of the Tiger, and it starts on February 1st, 2022. 再见, Year of the Ox. Since Lunar New Year is a time for new beginnings and family gatherings, we want to start celebrating with you, the MOCA family. MOCA proudly presents Virtual MOCA Fest 2020, the museum's annual celebration of the Lunar New Year. This evening, MOCA is honored to kick off its Lunar New Year programming by presenting our next fictional Spotlight Series speaker, the award-winning author Gish Jen, and her new book, Thank You, Mr. Nixon. Furthermore, as we enter the 2022 calendar year, there's so much that we are grateful at MOCA. Visitors and critics have lauded our exhibition, Responses, Asian American Voices Resisting the Tides of Racism, which launched in July 2021. So because of the success of Responses, we are extending the exhibit through March 2022 with free admission. So come visit us. If we enjoy this public program, we hope you will consider making a gift to become part of a continuing lifeline for MOCA. No amount is too little, and we greatly appreciate your generosity. Your contribution helps sustain our beloved institution and supports the creation of new online programming that will bring comfort and inspiration to more communities. Lastly, this program is brought to you by MOCA friends and partners, including Bloomberg Philanthropies. This program is also supported in part by public funds from the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council. Without further ado, I will let our moderator, MOCA President Nancy Masbach, to introduce our guest speaker, Gish Jen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Neil, and welcome everyone to this special event. And I can think of no better way to start the Lunar New Year activities at MOCA than to have a humanist, a writer, a storyteller, an imaginative genius to really start the festivities for us. And Gish, some people may be wondering, how did Gish get so much done during the pandemic and COVID? And many of us were watching Netflix, but Gish saw some of her most prolific days during the last 24 months, when I was certainly watching more Netflix than writing substantively. But we're so happy that you could join us here. And as some of you may know, we honored Gish Jen with the Legacy Award at the Museum of Chinese America's Gala a few years ago. And also we are bringing our gala back in person on March 31st at Cipriani Seaport. So you'll hear more information about that. And our honorees include Dr. David Lam of Lam Research, and also Gary Locke, former governor and U.S. ambassador to China, as well as the Joyous String Ensemble. So look forward to that. It should be a wonderful event and hopefully as safe, very much so. But before we bring Gish on, we wanted to provide a little tribute video to give everyone in this call the privilege of learning a little bit about her family, a video that we had created in honor of Gish's journey and her narrative. So if we can play the video for everyone's enjoyment, it's a little over 3 minutes, and we'll start the show after.
My mother once brought us to a store to buy, we could each buy 2 toys, and I remember that trip very well. I don't remember what the second toy was, but the first one, I bought this board game about the U.S. presidents. Can you imagine the most boring thing possible? What a little nerd. I don't really know what possessed me.
Gish is a very important American writer.
I first read Typical American when I didn't know Gish at all, and I happened to just pick it up.
She puts us Chinese Americans in a world that is real and current.
According to my father, misbehaving, he would pull me aside and say, "You're acting like a typical American." So when I saw this book called Typical American, I thought, I think this is for me. My legal name is Lillian Constance Jen. Constance was for the hurricane. This is Hurricane Constance. Because of this hurricane, my father had to carry my mother through through the flooded streets of New York. It's all very dramatic. So I read the book and I thought, oh my God, this is my story.
I was so impressed by this fresh voice that seem to be able to encompass all the complexities, all the contradictions, and all the fun of being Chinese American.
Gish's work resonates with so many people.
I still remember that, our family car for many years was the Volkswagen Bug. And of course, with 5 kids, you really are literally squished together. We were aware of the gaze on us. Like as we get out of the car, people were like, oh my God, is this Chinese family in this suburb where there are like no other people who look like us?
Because in one way or another, we've all felt outside.
I learned so much about myself and my parents and my community.
How are you outside and how are you inside? And what are the good things about being outside? That is what she taps into.
I feel it's just wonderful to me to be able to see America in the way that she sees it.
Throughout the years, her promise has only blossomed and expanded. She works in so many different genres now. She's become a lecturer, a teacher, and a role model to many more people than myself.
I feel like, life is for living.
She makes everybody laugh in person and in her writing. She has footnotes, but even the footnotes make you laugh.
Gish Jen has been an inspiration, a role model, and a friend to me.
It's been a continuing friendship. I feel as if she's my younger sister.
Yeah, it was dealt some tough cards, but who never let them define me.
Welcome, Gish Jen, to the Spotlight Series. And we love that last line. If we can bring Gish into the screen and show your video and mute. We're also on Facebook Live right now. And that will be replayed for those who might miss this. So Gish, it's so good to see you. Thank you for doing this. And I love watching that video, which, we helped, of course, put together, and we just think about it over and over again. And for those of you who are interested, the longer oral history with Gish is available on the MOCA website, on mocanyc.org. But thank you. Welcome, Gish.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to do anything with you guys.
And we have the big news, and this is this group of nearly 100 people on this call get the breaking news flash, which is Gish Jen has just been appointed to the board of directors of the MacArthur Foundation. That will be formally announced tomorrow. She will be the only current Asian American serving on the board. And it's an incredible accolade. And when Gish first mentioned that the news is going to come out right before the Spotlight Series conversation, I really thought of one word because, of course, the MacArthur Foundation is well known for the Genius Grants, but I thought, of course, Gish is going to be on this board. Genius on Genius board. Not to be, facetious in any way, but I do think some of the quotes from Maxine Hong Kingston and David Henry Huang about the way you're able to do so many things in so many different spaces, how you make the world interesting in so many different ways from your lens. Can you just share us a little bit about the new news and how you feel about that and how that all came about?
Oh, nobody could be more amazed than I. I simply got, an email one day. I had no idea. I really had no idea. I don't know how they pick members of their board. I hope I'll probably be on their nomination committee, once I actually assume my duties. So at that point, I may have a better idea how people are selected. But for me, it just comes out of the blue. I will say that I think that in a general kind of way that from my conversations with other members of the board, none of whom I'm the only Asian American, but I'm also the only humanist. And I think that I'm talking to some of the other people. I think that it was exactly the fact that I am so broad that appealed to them. So the fact that they could talk about artificial intelligence and I wouldn't flee from the room, right? and economics also. I did one thing about having dropped out of medical school, business school, and law school. How do somebody feel? So I know a little bit about everything. And And I'm interested in everything. I think that maybe that's what they really, what they understand is, interested in anything, and also I'm unafraid. So, but the MacArthur Board, if I may just make a quick public service announcement about it, the MacArthur Board does a lot more than just the Genius Grants. That is the thing that people know the best. But in fact, MacArthur funds all kinds of things. So they have a very big award called 100 and Change. It's $100 million. So if you have a very big project, some of these projects have had to do with, with homelessness, or the most recent grant was to children's television, to bring programming to the children of Syrian refugees. So that's a huge population that would otherwise not learn to read or write. And so they, they're interested in very, very, very big problems. They also place big bets on the order of $250 million to try to solve problems like corruption in Nigeria. So big problems. That said, they also have many, many, many small enduring commitments to ecosystems of ecosystems of the, so for instance, doing work in artificial intelligence, for example. So that's to say that, as my being there is obviously a signal to the Asian American community that MacArthur is interested in you and in us. And so not to be shy, if you have, if you have some project, they're interested in social justice on every level. So please don't be shy about digging around and seeing whether there is a place in the MacArthur ecosystem for you. So end of public service announcement. As you can see, I started my job I started my work as a board member, even though I'm really my appointment won't start till tomorrow.
That's why you're going to be the best board member, even though you did mention to us this is the first formal board that you're going to sit on. So that board,
I've been on many advisory boards, but I've never been on a board with any kind of fiduciary responsibility, anything like that. Right. So it was really kind of an unusual thing. I have to say that as I interviewed, I didn't have to interview with very many people to arrive at this point, and I kept on saying to them, I said, I've never been on a board before, and they said, no, we want someone just like you. And I felt, if that is the criterion, I have to tell you, I know a lot of people. Description.
Yeah. And I think our audience,
I did my best, Nancy, and I could not dissuade them.
They
went ahead in their folly. I kept on waiting for them to come to their senses, but they never did.
It's giving them more and more credibility, as this group can attest. And I think from the individuals on this call, I think some of us may still be lingering on the fact that you dropped out of med school and you dropped out of business school. I think that did not just fly by everyone's, I
actually wasn't in med school. I just dropped off the med school track, I should say, but I did drop out of an actual business. I did drop out of Stanford Business School.
Well, can you share a little bit about that? And I've been privy to some of the conversations and thought process, just to put it in the broader lens. You're so successful, right? You are representing Asian Americans on this board. You are often in places where other people don't look like you. You come from an immigrant upbringing where you're very much integrated into that culture and those aspects. Your work talks about the U.S. China, it talks about Chinese American, it talks about first generation immigrants, from different lenses. So in many ways, not pursuing the track is stereotypically a failure, and I just, and it isn't, and it is, but the pressures around some immigrant communities, and you write about, some of those different pressures, but can you tell us a little bit about I guess for lack of a better word, the audacity in not pursuing, not going down the clear path and that risk and your thought process?
I would like to say that, that I weighed the risks, the pros and the cons, and that and that I made a decision tree or something and came to some kind of rational decision. And that's how I became myself. But, in the end, it was finally, but, it's a very basic feeling that, let me just sort of say that because we were immigrants, we knew very few people well. And so I had not been to a funeral of anyone that I knew until I was in my 20s. So weirdly, we grew up without death. And then I went to a funeral. I thought, oh my God, like, everyone I know I'm going to die. Everyone I know is going to die. And I suddenly had this revelation that, I would be lying on my deathbed wishing that I had tried to become a writer. And I just said, you know what, that is not acceptable. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to die with that kind of regret, and I think once I realized that, I had to try to do it. And like I say, this is not a rational thing. It was just more this very strong feeling that I had and that I had to honor finally. So I don't know if that's an answer to your question exactly. I mean, I think that rationally, it's a lot, the lifestyle of a doctor is a much more reasonable lifestyle. Being a writer has rewards. It's funny, we're talking about objects and their intrinsic value and, the value that they had to us, which is very different than the value they have to the rest of the world. I mean, there's a way in which, being a writer is the only thing that I could really do. But I will say that that if I could make myself, be a lawyer, I probably would. It's a much more reasonable way to live your life.
I love that. And the other aspect of just living your life, and we've chatted about this, is that I guess the sociological phrase structural whole. You've mentioned that in terms of being a girl in a family of 5 children where the sons may have had some more opportunities, a little bit more attention from the parents. Can you share a little bit about your so I guess the freedom that you may have been able to leverage in not having your parents focused on you so much?
That's a really good point. I mean, so this is really about the development of that feeling, because the fact of the matter is, I think a lot of us have a feeling like that, and it's so buried that we ourselves are not really quite aware of it. So how was it that I could even feel it bubble up? And I think that one of the reasons is because exactly what you're saying. What you're saying, your question really has 2 levels. One level is within my family. My family was, because my parents were quite old when they came, and they came quite early. They're very, very Chinese. And so they're very much focused on that for a son, and they paid no attention to the girls whatsoever. And that in some ways that was a terrible thing, but in some ways it was a great thing, because I enjoyed a freedom that my brothers could never imagine. You know what I mean? Because my parents are sitting on them, and what are they doing, and what are they majoring in, and all this kind of stuff. And, as far as they were concerned, all I needed to do was sort of like be quiet, and smile and marry somebody. I mean, they really just didn't really care what I did. Like I said, sometimes, there were many times in my life when that felt like neglect, but it had this huge, huge, huge silver lining, which was that I was able to kind of develop the way that maybe, was just natural to me. And so when the time came, I could feel that this was my calling. Do you know what I mean? Like I could actually feel it in myself. So, and I will say too, that your question about being growing up in a structural whole is also a good one. That is a term that sociologists use for people who are not in kind of they're not firmly networked, in American society. So, a problem that a lot of people from the working class have is that to go on and to become an academic, say, is to betray this whole community that that you belong to, and with all of its norms, you have to say you're gay, and you're from some of these communities, and you decide to be a gay activist, like, well, that's not at all okay, not only with your family but your whole community. But because we're kind of in a structural whole, there's just a way in which, I did have to do battle with my parents in order to become a writer, but I didn't have a whole community telling me that I couldn't do that. And that was very helpful to me. So, I was kind of doubly lucky that way. Doubly lucky in an, doubly lucky and unlucky, I guess, depending on how you look at it. But I guess in my case, it was, I enjoyed freedom that really maybe very few people can really understand.
And just continuing to get to know you a little bit better in terms of some of the layers, below your writings and some of the public venues. I've noticed, and I think others have mentioned in different capacities, and Maxine in the video, but your humor. And you've talked about your father's humorous nature. And some people think humor is a mechanism, is a coping mechanism. I certainly have that in my own personality. And then also the imaginative components of the different types of writing that you've gone into, and the stories you've told from different vantage points, and how even when there is a tension, there is Gish's humor that humanizes the experience to make it more, I guess, accessible, from my personal sort of thinking of it. Can you talk a little bit about how humor has played into your work, but also perhaps your coping mechanism as a child of immigrants?
Well, let me just say that I actually think that my sense of humor is genetic. I mean, my father had a tremendous sense of humor, and now I see that my son has the same sense of humor. We think the same things are funny, like he knows as soon as I started with I have a task for you. I mean, he starts laughing immediately because he knows that, that the task could be some wonderful thing. You're going to have to go skiing for the next week. on my behalf, so see, he knows right away that some funny thing is coming up, and I have to say that I think that it's genetic. I think that look, they have many things to look at with the human genome. It's a long time before they'll be looking for the genes for humor, but I personally think that a large component of it is genetic. That said, I would say that if you're going to have some gene that you wish that you could, some gene that you were going to pick, because you knew that you were going to be an immigrant, this would be the gene to pick, because it's certainly very, very helpful. Because humor, it just you had that tendency, or that you have the always being able to step back, right? And as soon as you step back from any situation, like most situations, you take a step back, are pretty funny, right? And of course, we are in a situation where we're faced with incongruity all the time. And if you're if the person who steps back is not a person who feels like, oh my God, I'm being ground between these two systems. The person who steps back is a person who says like, oh my God, both sides are crazy, right? And which is just sort of true, right? And that's so that again, I just think it's just a way of it's a great gift to be able to disembed. And like I say, I do think that I have to thank my father for this gift, and certainly in writing, it has been tremendously helpful, given what I ultimately chose to write about. And there's so much, a cultural difference, in subjects that really are, inherently difficult. But there is a way in which if you can disembed, it just enables you to see things. And I do think that being able to take a step back is healing for all concerned.
I love that. And as we segue into your works and your portfolio of 9 books, both fiction and nonfiction, we'll show the page. I'm sure everyone has probably read all of the books here, but we'll share the screen to, of course, we'll talk a little bit about Mr. Nixon, but on the next page, we do have a reminder of all the books that Gish has written. And I think when I alluded to The Girl at the Baggage Room, I think was right before COVID in it's actually 2017, but I think you were going on the book tour in 2018 and 19, and then we shut down. And then somehow The Resistors came out in the middle of COVID. People didn't even know how that happened, Gish. But as a reminder, a wonderful piece of nonfiction title writing. And then, of course, your earliest and first piece, Typical American, and bringing us through this, the genre of first generation immigrants. And I guess one question as we then segue into Thank You, Mr. Nixon, The Resistors was so well popularized at a time when people couldn't, one, get work done, and two, didn't know how to publicize in this sort of new landscape of COVID and pandemic. Can you talk a little bit about your productivity as a writer during that period of time, and how in the world did you get this done?
Well, I spent a lot of time in northern Vermont, so not only was it, was I not seeing anybody, but it's very, very cold. You don't really want to go outside, and there's just not a lot to do, honestly. I mean, I don't actually watch a lot of TV anyway. But even if I want, I mean, I did watch, the chair and, a couple of other things. But honestly, how much TV can you watch? You can't watch 24/7. And there's literally nothing else to do but to write. And so for me, COVID was great. Of course look, my mother died during COVID. It's not like it was all, it was not all roses by any means. But that said, I did have a lot of unbroken time, and I don't know how many writers there are out in the audience, but a writer can tell you that 1 week of unbroken time is like a month worth of 1 days. A week is just a precious thing, and to have week after week after week, it's just an incredible gift. So that's how we now have Thank You, Mr. Nixon. I did write 5 stories and actually a novella also for Audible Originals during that time. So it's a very, very light thing for me.
Can we go to the Mr. Nixon page and please, for the audience members, I know we have a limited time with Gish, but please start putting your questions into the Q&A. We'll probably have about 15 minutes for Q&A with the audience, and then Gish is going to give us a great gift of reading one of the stories from Thank You, Mr. Nixon. But tell us about this collection of short stories. I think people were really excited when they knew that you were putting together another collection of short stories. And in the November issue of the New Yorker, one of the November 22nd, or November 15th, perhaps, there was one piece in that was listed, that was published in the New Yorker, and that was really well received. And then this is now on, I guess, back or Detective Dog, right? That was the name of it. And I love the names of it, which is then also supports the imaginative comment that Alice Young had mentioned to us in the pre-call. But tell us about Thank You, Mr. Nixon, and how it correlates with your thoughts right now about U.S. China relations, and many people typifying them as the most fraught period of time for U.S. China relations. And I see Jen Barris from National Committees on the call, Terry Lotz, who's doing our next presentation, Americans in China. Please come out for that conversation with Terry. But tell us about this work and why you felt it was imperative to do it at this time.
Well, let me say, first of all, that, it was just a very lucky thing for me that that the opening of China occurred just before I myself became a writer, right? So I first went back to back with my family in 1979, and then I went to China again to go teach coal mining engineers in Shandong province in 1981. And right after that, I enrolled in the Iowa Writers Workshop. So all that material was very for me, just as I was sitting down and really learning how to write. And then, of course, I've been writing stories all the way along. And as the landscape has shifted, meaning we have new groups of immigrants coming in, like it used to be there were no mainlanders here. Now when we see mainlanders in our classrooms and in other places. And so as those populations were shifting, I was just kind of writing the whole time, not really meaning to record things, but of course the material was just there. But then I sat down, during COVID, and I just thought, wow, I've been writing this whole time. Yes, and first of all, none of these stories would be possible had President Nixon not gone to China. And also, I guess when, now that you're asking me about the present moment, I guess, it's not like this book is not written as a reminder. Do you know what I mean? This is literature. It's not meant as a reminder of anything. However, what is also true is you can see how much change there has been. 50 years ago, China was behind a bamboo curtain. And it seems right now that, we are in a terrible spot and that this will never end. But I think if the history of China has shown us anything, it's that it could all change in a minute. And so I think that I'm not saying that I don't mean to be a Pollyanna. This is a very tough time in U.S. China relations, but we have been there before, and we have seen, a very, very difficult time turn to, a wonderful and booming time. So like I say, I guess I would say, you might think, it ain't over till it's over, except for China. I guess it's never over, so I guess that's what I would say. So, there is a way in which this collection does, I think, afford a kind of perspective, like, look how much has changed. We all saw this change, and we will see more change.
I love that. And we are collecting questions in the Q&A. Pamela Chen has such a good one. And I don't recall this. You were once cited in a study about how Asian Americans do not view themselves as the protagonists of their own stories. And Pamela is wondering, do you feel that that's changed, or maybe I'm suggesting changing? We always say pre and post Crazy Rich Asians, especially among the younger generation of Asian Americans. What do you think?
Well, let me
Gish?
just sort of say that, I'm sure that, I always, when I speak, I try to, include all the nuance, right? I try not to say Asian Americans anything, right? I mean, I don't need to tell you that, Asian Americans is a huge group. Americans with, first generation Hmong Americans. So I would not make a generalization like that. But it is true that if you are very close to the home culture, you do tend to have a self which is not as individual as the self that dominates in America. And again, America is no monolith, and there are many people who are fifth generation white Americans who also have a predominantly interdependent self. So it's not like, it's not like only Asian Americans are this way and only white Americans are just some other way. That's just not the case. However, what is true is that many people from other countries, especially East Asia, but also including Eastern Europe, for instance, Southern Italy, many people come with a self that is not so oriented towards self-realization. And that's not their first imperative. Their first imperative is often to serve some tradition or some larger group. That tradition could be a tradition of scholarship. And then in the East, it's frequently the family. And if you are very close to a tradition like that, you are not apt to be very self-focused, and you are not apt to see yourself primarily as the center of the universe. You're apt to see yourself as a team member. So the word good is very important to you. It's important to be a good teacher, a good teammate, a good president, but that word president, a great example is Dr. Fauci, a good doctor, and when he says things like, I don't know how to tell you that you should care for other people, that's a very interdependent statement that I think a lot of Asian Americans would resonate with. But you're right that if you are very close to the home culture, that you do tend to have an orientation toward being like a good doctor or a good teammate maybe is more important to you than simply realizing yourself. And also that does tend to change the longer that you are in America, and also probably, the deeper your association with capitalism, frankly. So that, yes, I do think that, in the aggregate, yes, it is changing. I don't know if that's too long an answer to the person's question. I wish that people could just talk to me, because then they could tell me whether I've answered their question or not.
I love that. And, actually, I remember with Sidney Poitier passed recently, and there was an interview that they were playing about his, I guess, his audacity for pursuing acting. He had a little bit of a speech impediment. And he said, you must understand that I grew up in a like people who looked with me. I had the confidence of who I was because I wasn't a minority. And he really didn't like going to Miami, Florida and spending, his later teen years, because he felt like it was such a place of being a minority. And I always struck this in terms of thinking of our own Chinese American identity, and more recent having been in a homogenous community, and then coming here, not necessarily with the same upbringing that perhaps we had, Gish, as children of immigrants, much more in the minority. Do you think that you were able to just counter some of that with your own mechanisms of being the minority? I mean, how was it that you were able to have that strength of mind and that courage to pursue the passion for being, I have to be a writer, right? What was that within?
Well, first of all, let me just sort of say that, my parents had a lot of self-confidence, and and that just, it has nothing to do with ethnicity or, and both my parents are very self-confident people. And which frankly, I think that there's something about it was self-selecting. I mean, who came? My mother came by herself to China, in her early 20s. And what kind of woman just kind of ups and ships herself off to America on her own for no real reason? I mean, there's no push, there's no economic push, there's no nothing, and she just decides to do it. She's a very self-confident person, and my father as well. And it's very interesting. Later on in life, I thought a little bit about language and how self-conscious people can be about like their parents' accent. And I was never self-conscious about my parents' accent because they weren't. My father's English was atrocious. That bothered him not at all, and therefore it didn't bother me at all. I knew it was atrocious, but I was never self-conscious. Like, my father doesn't speak English. My mother was very proud of her English, and I was very proud of her English for her because I thought my mother was really something. Her English was really great. So there was a way in which I just come from a background that's kind of that's like that. But I also will say that the fact of the matter is that because I read so much, I belonged to what they call an imagined community. And I belong to the imagined community of readers and writers. And it is a community that, of course, is all welcoming. And I could see that maybe the people didn't look like me, but believe me, I felt plenty in common with many a Jane Austen heroine, even though I, could not be less like them, I guess, on the surface, and on from there. So I think that the fact that I was a reader was just a tremendous help for me, and maybe helped me weather a lot of things that might otherwise would have been far more difficult.
I love that. I love that so much. And it helps me, thinking just about the people we meet at the museum and those who come in with different levels of sort of strength and mechanisms. We often have young people come in and they think that there's no interest in their story. And I always find that to be fascinating because they're Chinese or they're Chinese American, and they're coming into the Museum of Chinese in America, and yet their confidence is yet so low. And that's something that we always want to sort of make sure we meet them at the door. There have been so many great reviews about Thank You, Mr. Nixon, and please order them online. We will also be giving them out at the gala. If you would like to come to the gala, it will be one of your parting gifts. But one of the reviews I remember reading was that you're taking the micro level on a very complicated relationship politically and economically between the U.S. and China. And one of our questions from Tamio Spiegel, thank you for this, is what do you think? Is this really Xi Jinping's play? Do you see China's place in the world today as a result of a natural progression, or is it the leadership phenomenon of Xi Jinping? And would it be the same if it was someone else? Or is this really the cult of Xi Jinping, I guess, if you will? She didn't use the word cult, I just did. And I know that there are a lot of China hands, experts on the call. And I know that that's also sort of changing. That China hands label is a little different today with so many more expertise from different sectors. So Gish, what do you think? Is this a natural progression, or is it really cult of personality?
So let me say, first of all, that I really, I defer to the China hands. I'm sure they know much more about the subject than I do. But from the outside, what I can see is that, usually, there are forces that allow somebody like Xi Jinping to acquire this much power, right? I mean, it's just like, it's not really, I don't subscribe to the great man theory of history in any country. And I would not subscribe to it in China as well. So I think that there are larger forces. That said, kind of the right figure is certainly galvanizing. We shall see, if he ever steps down and who replaces him. But, if someone does replace him and someone is very different, I mean, that will represent, a faction that is, and their dissatisfaction. It won't simply be one person who stood up and and somehow changed the whole story. It will be many people and many small moments. I've recently been rereading War and Peace with my daughter, and Tolstoy is so good on this. The way that this person, that person, this person, that person, people whose names you can't even remember by the end of the book, and yet they played really critical roles. So I think, I think that that's true. That was true in Russia, and I think it's true in China today too. Do you know what I mean? So it's many, many little things go into the making, of a leader, and his ability to consolidate power this way or disseminate it. So I have hope yet.
I love that. And another question from the audience combined with something that we notice at the museum is it's very difficult, and many times, this whole notion of perpetual foreigner. And we talk about this a lot, 1 minute US is your friend, China is your friend. And the next moment the FBI is knocking on your door because you might be a spy. One moment, Japan is your friend, and the next they are, interned and therefore also considered the enemy. And Joan Ching said, there are so many positive things about the post-Nixon trip, and family reunification was certainly one of them. And also after 65 and Johnson's Immigration Nationality Act, where we were able to bring families together that were spread all over the world. In hindsight, we thought, oh yeah, of course they're going to reunite, but actually we didn't see that. You didn't see it coming for, it was inevitable when that would be. So what are your thoughts about the pros and cons of where we are today? And you alluded to this in your earlier comments. We've witnessed a lot in our lifetimes. Everyone on this call, we've witnessed a lot in the U.S. China relationship and the development of China, the PRC, and what's happening in Taiwan, the cross-strait relationship. There's so many fraud issues. We've witnessed a lot. How are you sort of looking at this, and how does this book add to this overall understanding of the complexity?
Well, my book is not, I will leave it to the historians to record everything that's happened. And of course, my book is really focused on the last 50 years. But if you look at the 50 years prior to that, it's just like the amount of history is just overwhelming, right? And, I'm interested in the human experience, like what that meant to us, to people like you and me. And of course, the people in the book are, there are many, many different people. Just how many people were affected by these huge things are happening that they're not even really aware of. You ask them about what about that 65 legislation, I'm not even sure they even know what you're talking about, right? And yet, their lives are very much touched by it, even as they go about their lives and they make their own lives too. Do you know what I mean? So, so I guess that's to say that, my book is really about, like I say, the human experience of history. So it's not about Xi Jinping. It's not about, even the revolution really so much as it is about what it means to have your life shaped by history. As of course, all of our lives are shaped by history. You don't have to be Asian American to have your life shaped by history. But in this case, I was able to actually capture the history as it is going on in the background of people's lives, and in a sense of its presence. And that's not always easy to get onto the page. So I'm very happy to have been able to convey some sense of that.
Love that. And one thing that I always recall in the interaction that we had, in fact, our first interaction, that you were so open and friendly to a person that, you didn't know. And I was like, this is Gish Jen. I'm like the head of the fan club, and she's talking to me. And I just think that the notion that you're so open to people and to their stories and to their experiences. But I will share with this audience that we had organized, when I was at U.S China, a wonderful panel between Gish Jen, when she had written Tiger Writing, and Amy Chua, who had just finished Battle Hymn of the, the Tiger Mom. And so the two of them sitting next to each other, both very accomplished, very acclaimed. And one's talking about Tiger Writing, one's talking about Tiger Mom. And you could not be had more polar opposites in terms of how you raised your children, how you gave them sort of like the liberal, yeah, do what you want. And Tiger Mom's like, play violin. But also, and of course, this is in a room full of more recent immigrant Chinese American families, and their jaws dropped on the floor because they don't know who to believe, either Gish Jen or Amy Chua. And the funny thing is, it was very funny. I think all your children had gone to Harvard. So it was really confusing to the audience. They're like, okay, Gish is saying laissez-faire, and Amy Chua is saying, harder, more. So can you tell us a little bit about just your philosophy, to raising your children, thinking about pursuits? What advice would you give to someone, and this is going to sound very odd, but I need to say it in this way, to be successful in America as a person who might be of Chinese ancestry or immigrant background, where they may be in a structural hole? Like, how do you just pursue your passion? Or how do you do it in a, weighted, I don't know. What advice would you give this audience?
Well, first, I think the first thing that's obvious is that, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. I mean, and I think that, actually Amy's kids have come out great and my kids have also come out great. And I'm listening to her, I was so impressed that, I was thinking, wow, like, listen to that. I thought, wait. And her kids got into, but wait, my kids also got into Harvard. It's a very funny thing. And I mean, I myself have kind of forgot as she was going on. And I think that what you really can see is that both she and I really loved our children. I mean, you could just see that, you may, whatever you think about the way that she went about showing her love, it's clear that she really loved them. And I really love my children, and I showed it in a very different way. I mean, it's true. All I ever said to them was have fun. I will say until a certain stage at which I sort of said, but not too much fun. But that's all I ever said to them was have fun. And what you can see is that there's no answer. A lot of it depends on the children too. I mean, honestly, my kids, my daughter, I would say, oh, let's go to Vermont now. And she was like in third grade, and she would say, I can't go. I would say, well, why not? She said, I have too much work. Remember, she wouldn't come to Vermont with us unless she could bring a printer. I mean, so a lot of it depends on, so you could sort of see why I would only say to her, like, please have fun. But a lot of it depends on the child as well. And, but I do think that in a general kind of way, I think that the old Chinese ways, which are very focused on survival, that, you don't have to worry so much about survival in America. It's kind of like, if you go to China, as it's not like you just don't succeed. What you do is you kind of fall off the conveyor belt and, in quite an unpleasant and unfortunate way, right? I mean, that possibility is always there. Here in America, for most of the people, at least the kind of people who are on this kind of a call, the likelihood of your children really ending up in a very, very, very bad place is not so high, right? There's just a lot more latitude. There are a lot more ways of being successful here in America. And so I think as parents, you should just be aware that, there's no one route at all. And sometimes these kids, they need a little direction, but sometimes you just need to get out of their way.
I love that. I'm taking copious notes as I raise my teenagers. But a final question, and then we'll have the real privilege of in listening to Gish read an excerpt, a short story from the new book. But this is a great question. When you read something about Chinese immigrants written by a non-Chinese ancestry writer, in a setting that you might be familiar with, hypothetically Manhattan, Chinatown, what is your reaction to that? Does it ever spark ideas of is it more fiction? I think the mention was Patrick Radden Keefe wrote about in Snakehead about Manhattan's Chinatown. But do you have any reaction to that?
Sometimes they get it wrong. I have to say that I recently read Kazuo Ishiguro's When We Were Orphans, which is about, it's on Shanghai in 30s. And honestly, a lot of the dialogue to which, which was ascribed to certain Chinese characters, I felt was just wrong. And that will happen in fiction. So it's kind of, in this case, the person himself has, some Japanese background, and you would think that he could do this very well. And in this case, he didn't do it so well. He's done other things just spectacularly well. And this kind of thing will happen. In my view, I still think that we should all be trying to write across boundaries. I think we should do our homework. I think that I have written Jewish Americans, Cambodian Americans, all Irish Americans, all kinds of Americans. I think that as a writer, I think that it is a gift, honestly, to all concerned, to see these groups interacting with each other. There is always a possibility that somebody would be hugely offended. I try, however, to do my homework so that so the result is like in Mona the Promised Land, I've had a lot of Jewish people come up to me and sort of say, you know what, I read your book and that's how I know what it means to be Jewish. I mean, I try to get it right. That said, writers will make mistakes, and and I made one very small mistake. The Cambodian Americans in World and Town. The good news is a lot of Cambodians came up to me and said, "Oh my God, it was like you held a mirror up to our lives, and that was just right, and that's what it means to be Cambodian." But I did get the kind of Buddhism wrong, just like whoa, that's quite a mistake. So writers will make errors. But I do think that maybe what's important is that the writers they understand they are writing about another culture and that they are doing their damnedest to really empathize and understand that there's a difference. Like, I think to simply write as if, they're just like us is just simply naive. And it's just naive. So, do I wish that they would do their homework? Yes. Do I feel that they shouldn't do it? No, I think they absolutely should do it. And if you think that you can do a better job, it's time for you to sit down, put your hands on the keyboard, get it out.
I love that. Gish Jen, for those of you who missed the beginning part, was just elected to the board of directors of the MacArthur Foundation. So we got that news hot off the press. Someone, Hanley, was asking about that. Also, she had an excerpt from Thank You, Mr. Nixon, called Detective Dog. That was in the November 22nd, 2021 New Yorker. She has written many short stories. Thank You, Mr. Nixon will be available February 1st on all platforms and formats. Please pre-order it. We're putting it in the chat right here. But there'll be the audio, there'll be the Kindle, and it's a wonderful, heartening book in a time when many of us on this call are worried about U.S. China relations, but Gish humanizes it, and that's really your gift to in so much of your writing to all of us. You are going to give us the great pleasure of reading from Thank You, Mr. Nixon, and get to know Lulu. And thank you for everyone who's on this call and for your questions. For the next 5 to 6 minutes, we'll be able to listen to Lulu, and we'll close with some last minute things. Over to you, Gish.
So I'm reading from Thank You, Mr. Nixon. And this is a story called Lulu in Exile. This actually, interestingly, first appeared in Fashions of the Times, the New York Times of all places. Arnie Shu the Success, brother of Duncan Shu the Failure, had his own import-export business. This now involved not only a US office and a Hong Kong office, but a factory in Shanghai and a factory in Italy, as well as 40 lucky employees, all of whom amassed frequent flyer miles at an enviable rate as a result of their good attitude toward life. Arnie, who boasted the best attitude of everyone, wore Italian suits in colors named for vitamin-rich vegetables like eggplant and kale. Also, he wore wraparound sunglasses and had his car washed inside and out while he went shopping with his nubile girlfriend from Hong Kong, Lulu. Lulu did not have to have a good attitude, being full of entertainingly skewed views. For example, she could never get over how underdeveloped malls were in America. She believed Americans were not true shoppers, being too enamored of parks. "Explain to me about trees," she once said to Duncan, showing him a tie that she had bought for Arnie, but that Arnie had turned out to already own. "I know people in America like to walk around in the woods with the mosquitoes, but why do they like such things? How about if you explain to me, okay?" Her tone turned wheedling as she made a pretty show of her dimples. "I give you this nice tie for a present." Nobody loved Hong Kong like Lulu. First of all, as a vertical city easily negotiated by chauffeured car and elevator, Hong Kong was perfect for high heels. Also, it was a city where girls were girls, where Lulu could top a lime green bustier with a red velvet Mao jacket and laugh at American tourist girls in their flip-flops and sackcloth. But now, thanks to history, here she was, exiled to natural fiberland. Some people thought Hong Kong would be fine after the handover, but the Shus simply didn't. You watch, we are all going to end up in a nice American suburb, they predicted, including Lulu in that we, even though Arnie and Duncan's mother wondered if Lulu would make a good wife. All she knows is spend money, Marge complained to Duncan. Never mind that she was theoretically not talking to him. Recently, she had taken to cutting out articles about every sort of learning disability now known and sending them all to him, as if one of them must explain something. Children need a real mother, tell them what to do, what is right attitude, what is wrong attitude, who their friend should be, otherwise what? Otherwise, nobody is going to graduate school, that's what. Otherwise, all the kids turn out like me, exactly. So bad that mothers can't sleep at night thinking that it is their fault. What do you mean my fault? Marge said. You never listen to anything I say. You think you know everything already. That is your whole problem. If I tell you you are stupid, do you listen to me? Of course not. Instead, you say, if I'm so stupid, how come blah, 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 blah. But it's true, Ma. If I'm so stupid, Duncan tried to remind his mother that he did have a wife and kids and a tea shop that, if not a big deal company like Arnie's, did at least break even. But Marge wasn't listening. Forget about true. That is your whole problem. You want to tell me what is true, as if you are the mother. That's why I'm not speaking to you these days, because I am the mother. I am the one who says what is true. Do you hear me? Faintly, he said. This may or may not have been why his mother really did stop speaking to him, and how it happened that she advanced her plot on Lulu strictly on her own. Arnie did not believe this, but it was true. It was strictly on her own that Marge called the fanciest store in town and ordered a red silk duster, a matching red silk jumpsuit, and a see-through red motorcycle jacket, all in size 2. Try them on, said Marge as Lulu opened the boxes. You can wear the jumpsuit with the duster or with the jacket, either way. Lulu hesitated. But I am a size 6. No, said Marge. Only in your mind you are a size 6. What I say is true. You are a size 2. Size 6 is the size of a horse. I am not a horse, wailed Lulu. Of course not, said Marge. You are a size 2. Also, she cajoled Lulu into having lunch with her. Arnie says you love chocolate mousse, she said, to which Lulu said, no, only to have Marge order it anyway. Don't be polite, she said, and you haven't eaten one bite, and you don't like it? I order something else. No. But a banana split arrived, and after the banana split, a strawberry shortcake, and after the strawberry shortcake, a baked Alaska. I love you, Lulu told Arnie that night. You are a great success, but I wonder about our future. Oh, Lulu, said Arnie with a misty look. There's nothing to wonder about. I've just been waiting for the right moment to ask. That's not it. And the ring. You said yourself that you didn't know what cut you liked best. Your mother had so much fun, she wants to take me shopping every week, said Lulu. Arnie stopped short, puzzled. She says if we get married, she's going to take me shopping every day. But Lulu, said Arnie after a moment, you like to shop. And after shopping lunch, said Lulu, she says if we get married, she's going to take me to lunch every single day. And that's too much to ask? To have lunch with my mother? For me? For us? I thought we were in love. We were, said Lulu. But then she could say no more, as overcome by sobbing, she adjusted Arnie's tie for him one last sweet time.
Thank you, Gish. Gish Jen. Thank you, Mr. Nixon. Thank you, Gish Jen. Congratulations on the appointment. Thank you for not only writing pieces that just give us great space for our own imaginations and illuminating opportunities, and but also your nonfiction work that teaches us how to do things, and also for many of the commentaries you do write on current Asian American issues. I think many of us have seen it, and I've always been happily surprised that you're commenting on Fresh Off the Boat or other, current topics and things that aren't that pleasant, but trying to giving us I think you always challenge any generalization or stereotyping. And as someone in at the museum where we try to do this every day, I just greatly appreciate that contribution to the general public, and thank you so much. And I think everyone on this call has shown great enthusiasm. We will be making sure that we are publicizing this book big time, and please buy the book. It's on pre-order right now. You'll have it in your hands on February 1st. And thank you so much, Gish. And for those of who you may want to join the next session, Terry Loss will be sharing on his book, Americans in China. That talk is on February 10th, a part of our Lunar New Year Fest. And there's a ton of opportunity on this lunar, all free and virtual. If you really want to hear about the water tiger year, and you can brace yourself because it's not all good news, Joanna Lee and Ken Smith will be sharing their Chinese almanac at upcoming session. But most importantly, Gish, thank you so much for kicking off our Lunar MOCA Fest celebration. And 新年快乐，恭喜发财。
Gong Xi, Gong Xi. My pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks to all the participants and those on Facebook Live. We'll have this on record, so if anyone would like to share with others, you can get it on the MOCA website or MOCA Facebook page. Good night, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Gish. We're sending a little thank you in the mail. All right. Take care. We have to,
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.